People often say that grief is a fog, a thick mist that clouds your judgment. They are wrong. For me, standing in the freezing rain of the Blackwood estate, grief was a magnifying glass. It made every ugly truth sharp, clear, and terrifying. It was the day of my father's funeral. The weather was appropriately miserable, a grey, weeping sky over the English countryside. I stood apart from the others, the mud seeping into my shoes, shivering in a thin black dress. No one offered me an umbrella. I was the eldest daughter, yet I looked like a stranger at my own father's grave. I watched them, the family. Lady Beatrice, my stepmother, was putting on the performance of her life, dabbing at eyes that were completely dry. And there was Arthur, my husband, the man I had shared my bed with for 3 years. He stood close to my half-sister Chloe. Too close. I told myself I was imagining it, but then I saw it. A subtle movement. Arthur's hand, the one wearing our wedding band, slipped discreetly beneath Chloe's coat. He squeezed her waist, a gesture of possession, a gesture of lust. Right there, over my father's casket. The air left my lungs. The betrayal wasn't hot or fiery, it was cold. It was an absolute zero that froze my heart instantly. I realized then that the tears on their faces were fake. The only real thing in that graveyard was the hatred they held for me. They didn't just want my inheritance, they wanted to erase me. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. But as the first shovel of dirt hit the coffin, I made a vow. I would not let them take my father's legacy. I would not let them win. This is not a story about forgiveness. This is a story about what happens when you push a good woman too far. Do you want to witness the fall of the wicked? Do you want to see exactly how I destroyed them using their own greed? Comment part 1 right now. The reading of the will is about to begin, and you will not believe what happens next. The ceremony ended not with a bang, but with the wet thud of soil hitting wood. That sound will haunt me for the rest of my days. As the mourners began to disperse, a sea of black umbrellas drifting away like crows, I felt the physical weight of my new reality. I was the daughter of the Earl, yet I had never felt more like an intruder. I turned to find Arthur, my husband, the man who had vowed to protect me. I needed his arm. I needed to feel a solid presence beside me to keep my knees from buckling under the weight of grief. But he was already walking away. He was moving towards the lead limousine, the one reserved for the immediate family. He was ushering Beatrice and Chloe inside, his hand hovering solicitously at the small of Chloe's back. I called out to him, my voice cracking against the wind. "Arthur, wait!" He stopped. He turned, but he did not come back. He looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as pity mixed with impatience. He said, "Eleanor, you understand, do you not? Beatrice is distraught. She needs a man's strength right now. You are strong, Elle. You have always been the strong one. Take the second car. I will meet you at the house." Before I could protest, before I could scream that I was not strong, that I was shattering into 1,000 pieces, the car door slammed shut. I watched through the tinted glass as he settled into the seat next to Chloe. I saw her lean her head onto his shoulder. I saw him not push her away. I was left standing in the mud. The second car, a smaller, older sedan, waited for me. I climbed in, and the silence inside was deafening. The driver, a man who had known me since I was a child, refused to meet my eyes in the rear-view mirror. Even the staff knew. Everyone knew but me. The drive back to Blackwood Manor took 40 minutes. 40 minutes to replay 3 years of marriage in my head. How could I have been so blind? I thought of the late nights Arthur spent in London. Business, he had said, client dinners, urgent consultations. I remembered the nights he came home smelling faintly of vanilla and expensive tobacco. I had asked him once about the scent. He laughed it off, saying it was the cologne of a senior partner. But vanilla and tobacco was not a man's scent. It was Chloe's signature perfume. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I leaned my head against the cold window pane, watching the grey English countryside blur past. Every smile, every touch, every excuse Arthur had ever given me now looked like a lie. He had not just married me. He had married the title, the money, and the proximity to my sister. When the car finally crunched over the gravel of the driveway, the manor loomed out of the mist. It was a magnificent structure of grey stone and ivy, a place that had been my sanctuary for 26 years. Today, it looked like a prison. I stepped out of the car. The rain had stopped, replaced by a damp, clinging fog. The household staff was lined up at the entrance to receive us. Usually, Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper, would greet me with a warm smile, perhaps a comforting touch on the arm. Today, she stared strictly at her shoes. Her hands were clasped tight in front of her apron, her knuckles white. There was a palpable tension in the air, a thick, suffocating dread. It was as if the house itself had changed allegiance. The warmth was gone. The portraits of my ancestors in the hallway seemed to look down on me with disapproval. I walked into the grand foyer. Beatrice was already there, shedding her coat, barking orders at a young maid about the temperature of the tea. She did not look like a grieving widow. She looked like a general who had just successfully occupied enemy territory. Chloe was lounging on the chaise, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. Arthur standing dutifully by her side, holding her glass of sherry. They stopped talking when I entered. The silence that fell was heavy and sharp. It was the silence of conspirators who had been interrupted. Beatrice looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my muddy hem with distaste. She said, "Eleanor, do try to make yourself presentable before the solicitor arrives. We have business to discuss, and I will not have you looking like a drowned rat in my drawing room." My drawing room. She had said it so easily. Not our drawing room, not the family drawing room, hers. I looked at Arthur, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell her that this was still my home, that I was still his wife. He took a sip of his sherry and looked away, focusing intently on a painting on the far wall. That was the moment the final crack formed in my heart. I realized then that I was entirely alone. The funeral was over, but the nightmare was just beginning. I walked past them, head high, listening to the click of my heels on the marble floor. I needed to change. I needed to wash the mud from my skin, and I needed to prepare myself. Because whatever was waiting for me in that drawing room, I knew it was going to be worse than death. The library was a room of mahogany and old leather, smelling of my father's pipe tobacco and centuries of history. It was the heart of the Blackwood estate. I used to sit on the rug by the fire while father read to me. But today, the fire was unlit. The room was cold, and the air was thick with the scent of treachery. Mr. Finch, the family solicitor, sat behind father's massive oak desk. He was a small, nervous man who seemed unable to meet my gaze. He shuffled his papers, the sound echoing too loudly in the silence. Beatrice sat in father's leather armchair, looking entirely too comfortable. Chloe was examining her fingernails, bored. Arthur stood by the window, his back to me, watching the rain. I sat on a hard wooden chair in the centre of the room, feeling like a criminal awaiting sentencing. Mr. Finch cleared his throat. It was a dry, scratching sound. He began to read. "I, the Earl of Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all former wills and testaments. The legal jargon washed over me until he reached the distribution of assets. I straightened my back, waiting for my name. Father had always promised me the library. He knew it was the only place I truly loved. He had also spoken of a trust fund to ensure my independence. Mr. Finch's voice wavered slightly. To my wife, Lady Beatrice, I bequeath the entirety of the Blackwood estate, including the manor, the grounds, all liquid assets, and full control over the family investments. The room spun. Entirety. That was impossible. The title was hereditary, but the assets, the house. I stood up, my legs trembling. There must be a mistake, Mr. Finch. My father, he would not leave everything to Beatrice. He has a daughter. Beatrice sighed, a long, weary sound, as if dealing with an unruly toddler. Sit down, Eleanor. Do not make this more difficult than it already is. I ignored her. Mr. Finch, read the section regarding me. I want to hear my name. The solicitor looked at Beatrice. She gave a barely perceptible nod. He looked down at the paper, his face flushing red. Regarding my daughter, Eleanor. He paused. Read it, I demanded, my voice rising. I have made the difficult decision to exclude her from the management of the estate due to her ongoing fragility and history of mental instability. The words hit me like a physical slap. Mental instability? Fragility? I had nursed my father through his final illness. I had managed the household accounts when he was too weak to hold a pen. I was the one who kept this family standing. That is a lie, I shouted, looking wildly around the room. I am not unstable. Father knew that. He trusted me. Beatrice stood up then. She walked over to me, her face a mask of tragic concern. She reached out to touch my shoulder, and I flinched away. Oh, Eleanor, she cooed, her voice dripping with poisonous honey. Look at you. You are shaking. You are shouting. Just like the doctor warned us. You are having one of your episodes. I am not having an episode. Arthur, tell them. I turned to my husband. This was his moment. He knew me. He knew I was sane. He knew how much I loved my father. Arthur turned from the window. He looked at me, his eyes hollow and cold. Eleanor, please. You are upsetting Beatrice. Perhaps your father was right. You have been under a lot of stress. You are not yourself. The ground fell away beneath my feet. My husband, my partner. He was agreeing with them. He was calling me mad. Beatrice shook her head sadly. We only want what is best for you, darling. The estate is too much responsibility for someone in your condition. Your father wanted to protect you. That is why he left everything to me. To keep you safe. Safe. She used the word like a weapon. I looked at the piece of paper in Mr. Finch's hand. I knew my father's signature. I needed to see it. I lunged forward. Let me see it. It is a forgery. Arthur caught me before I could reach the desk. His grip was hard, hurting my arms. Eleanor, stop it. Control yourself. He dragged me back. I looked at Mr. Finch, begging him with my eyes to speak the truth, but he just closed the folder and put it in his briefcase. The meeting is adjourned, Beatrice said calmly. Arthur, take her to her room. Make sure she takes a sedative. We cannot have her running around the house in this state. I was led out of the library, tears finally spilling down my face. Not tears of grief, but tears of pure, impotent rage. They had taken my home. They had taken my inheritance. But the cruelest cut was that they had used my dead father's voice to do it. They had made him call me mad. And for a terrifying second, as the door clicked shut behind me, I wondered if he really had. If you believe that Will was a lie, comment the number 2 below. I need to know I am not the crazy one here. They thought I was asleep. They thought the sedative Beatrice forced into my hand had done its work. But I had spat the pill into the potted fern the moment Arthur closed my bedroom door. I could not sleep. The silence of the house was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I walked down the corridor. The floorboards of Blackwood Manor usually creaked, but I knew where to step to remain silent. I had played hide-and-seek in these halls as a child. Now I was a ghost in my own home. I went to Arthur's room first. It was empty. The bed was made, the sheets crisp and cold. A terrible instinct pulled me further down the hall, towards the east wing, towards Chloe's room. I stood outside her heavy oak door. I expected to hear hushed whispers, or perhaps the sounds of illicit passion. But what I heard was far worse. I heard laughter, bright, easy, comfortable laughter, the sound of two people sharing an inside joke. I pushed the door open. It was not locked. Why would they lock it? They owned the house now. They had nothing to fear from me. The scene before me was domestic, terrifyingly domestic. A fire was crackling in the hearth. Arthur was sitting in the armchair, his tie loosened, a glass of my father's vintage brandy in his hand. Chloe was curled up on the rug at his feet, flipping through a magazine. They looked up as I entered. They did not jump. They did not scramble to cover themselves. They just looked at me with mild annoyance, as if I were a maid who had brought the wrong tea. And then I saw it. What Chloe was wearing. It was a nightgown of champagne silk, trimmed with French lace. I knew every stitch of that gown. I had bought it in Paris for my honeymoon. I had worn it on the balcony in Venice, while Arthur smoked and looked at the canal. I had felt beautiful in it. Now it was draped over my sister's body. "You are wearing my clothes," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. Chloe glanced down at the silk. "Oh, this? I found it in your wardrobe while they were moving your things. It is a bit loose in the bust, honestly. You really should shop for your size, Eleanor." Arthur took a sip of brandy. "Go back to bed, Eleanor. You look manic." "Manic?" I repeated. "I am your wife, Arthur. You are in my sister's bedroom, drinking my father's brandy, while she wears my honeymoon lingerie, and you call me manic?" Arthur sighed and set the glass down. He stood up, but he did not come to comfort me. He looked at me with a bored expression. "Stop the dramatics, Elle. It is tedious." This, he gestured between himself and Chloe, this was inevitable. "Look at you. You are so rigid, so cold. Living with you was like living in a library, quiet, dusty, and incredibly dull." The air left my lungs. Dull. I had given him stability. I had given him dignity. "I loved you," I whispered. "Did you? Or did you just love the idea of a husband?" Arthur sneered. "Chloe is fun, Eleanor. She is alive. She knows how to enjoy the money your father hoarded. We were just discussing the renovations. We are going to knock down the wall between the drawing room and the conservatory, open the place up, get rid of all that gloomy Victorian wood." He was talking about destroying my home while looking me in the eye. "Get out," I said. My voice shook. "Get out of my house." Chloe laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "Your house? Oh, darling, did you hit your head? Mummy owns the house now, and Arthur is staying right here with me." Arthur walked over to the door, holding it open for me. His face was a mask of polite cruelty. "Good night, Eleanor. Do close the door on your way out. There is a terrible draught in the hallway." I stood there for a heartbeat, looking at the man I had married. The mask had fallen completely. There was no love, no guilt, not even pity. just a hollow, greedy man who had finally secured his prize. I turned and walked away. I did not slam the door. I did not scream. I walked back to my cold, empty room, with a strange clarity rising in my mind. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. In their place, something else was beginning to grow. Something cold and hard and sharp. They thought I was boring. They thought I was weak. They had no idea what a boring, weak woman could do when she had nothing left to lose. If you have ever been betrayed by the person you trusted most, comment the number 3. I'm going to make them pay for every single tear. The eviction notice did not come on paper. It came over breakfast. I walked into the morning room, my eyes swollen from a sleepless night. Beatrice was buttering a piece of toast with surgical precision. She didn't look up. "Eleanor," she said, her voice light and conversational, "we have been discussing your situation. The doctor agrees with me. The stimulation of the main house is too much for your fragile nerves. You need isolation, quiet, to convalesce." I stood by the sideboard, untouched tea in my hand. "Where are you sending me? Asylum?" Beatrice chuckled. "Heavens, no. We are not monsters. We are moving you to the old gatehouse." The teacup rattled in its saucer. The old gatehouse was a stone structure built in the 18th century for the groundskeeper. It had no central heating. The roof leaked. It had been used for storage for the last decade. It was essentially a shed with a fireplace. "That place is derelict, Beatrice," I said. "It is freezing." "It is rustic," she corrected, "and it is secluded, perfect for someone in your mental state. You will move today, by noon." I went to my room to pack. I did not cry. I was past crying. I opened my wardrobe, but Mrs. Higgins was already there, blocking my path. Her eyes were red. "I am sorry, my lady," she whispered. "Her ladyship gave strict orders. You are only to take the basics." I looked at the pile on the bed. 3 simple wool dresses, 2 coats, my sturdy walking boots, my silk gowns, my cashmere sweaters, my riding habits. Everything that marked me as the daughter of an earl remained in the closet. I walked to the vanity table. There was only one thing I truly cared about, the small velvet box containing my mother's emerald earrings. They were not part of the Blackwood estate. They were her personal property, left to me on her deathbed. I reached for the box. Suddenly, a hand slammed down on top of mine. "Beatrice!" "Tusk, Eleanor," she said, prying the box from my fingers. "Stealing family silver on your way out?" "These are my mother's," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "These are Blackwood heirlooms," she hissed. "And as the current Countess of Blackwood, I am the custodian of the collection. You are no longer fit to wear them. You might lose them in one of your fits." She pocketed the box. "Now get out, before I call the guards to drag you out." The walk from the manor to the gatehouse was only half a mile, but it felt like crossing a continent. It was raining again, a cold, spitting drizzle. I dragged my single suitcase through the mud. The wheels sank into the wet earth, making it heavy, clumsy work. I was not walking to a carriage. I was walking into exile. Halfway down the drive, I stopped. I couldn't help it. I turned around to look at the house one last time. The lights were on in the drawing room. Through the tall French windows, I could see silhouettes. Arthur and Chloe. They were standing by the window, watching me. I saw Arthur raise a champagne flute in a mock toast. Chloe was laughing, her head thrown back. They were celebrating my erasure. I turned my back on them and faced the gatehouse. It sat in the shadow of the great iron gates, dark, damp, and covered in moss. I pushed open the heavy wooden door. The air inside smelled of rot and neglect. There was a layer of dust on everything. A dead bird lay in the empty fireplace. I sat down on the bare mattress of the iron bed frame, shivering in my damp coat. I looked at my hands. They were muddy. My nails were broken. I was Lady Eleanor Blackwood. I had been raised to host royalty. I had been educated in the finest schools, and now I was a squatter in my own garden. But as I sat there in the cold, listening to the rain hammer against the leaking roof, I realized something. They had taken my jewels. They had taken my clothes. They had taken my warmth. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had left me with my mind. Beatrice said I needed time to think. Well, she was right. I had plenty of time now, and I was going to use every second of it to plan their destruction. If you want to see how I survived the winter in hell, comment the number 4. The transformation begins now. Decoration begins now. 60 days of grey skies and gnawing hunger. Winter had settled over the Blackwood estate, turning the mud into iron-hard ruts. In the gatehouse, I learned the true meaning of cold. It was not just a temperature, it was a roommate. It slept in the bed with me. It ate at my fingers until the skin cracked and bled. To survive, I had to swallow the last shreds of my pride. The allowance Beatrice gave me was barely enough for bread and tea, so I took the job she offered. I became a servant in my own home. Every morning, I walked up the driveway to the manor. I did not enter through the front door anymore. I used the tradesman's entrance, like the butcher or the coalman. My duties were specific, tasks that were too tedious for the regular staff, but required a delicate touch. Polishing the family silver, mending the antique tapestries, arranging the elaborate floral displays for Beatrice's endless parties. One afternoon, the humiliation reached its peak. Beatrice was hosting a charity luncheon for the local gentry. I was in the drawing room, on my knees, polishing the brass fender of the fireplace. My hands were red and rough, my dress faded. The guests arrived early. I tried to scramble away, but Beatrice stopped me. "Oh, don't mind Eleanor," she announced to the room, her voice dripping with performative benevolence. "We let her help out around the house. It gives her structure. Poor thing needs to feel useful, you know." The ladies looked at me, some with pity, most with curiosity, as if I were a zoo animal on display. I kept my head down, scrubbing the brass until my reflection stared back at me, a pale, hollow-eyed ghost. From the corner of my eye, I saw Arthur. He was showing off a new watch to a group of men, a Patek Philippe, solid gold. It cost more than what the estate used to spend on maintenance for a year. Through the window, I could see Chloe's new convertible parked in the drive. They were not just spending my father's money. They were devouring it. They were bleeding the legacy dry, treating the Blackwood fortune like an endless buffet. I finished my work and fled back to the gatehouse before dusk. It was freezing inside. Beatrice had graciously sent down a box of old papers and books from the library to use as kindling for my fire. Junk, she had called it. Old rubbish your father hoarded. I sat by the small grate, shivering, and reached into the box to grab a handful of paper to burn. My hand closed around a small, leather-bound notebook. The cover was mouldy, but the binding held. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Father's. I opened it. It was not an account book. It was a journal. The entries were from the last year of his life. I began to read, tilting the pages towards the dying light of the fire. Entry dated October 12th. Beatrice is asking about the offshore accounts again. She thinks I do not see her greed. She thinks I am a senile old fool. Entry dated November 3rd. I found Arthur and Chloe in the stables today. They did not see me. The way they looked at each other. I fear I have made a grave mistake with Eleanor's marriage. I must protect her. I must speak to Sterling in London. My heart hammered against my ribs. He knew, all along he knew. I turned to the final entry, written just days before his death. The handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear. I do not trust the food Beatrice brings me. I feel weaker after every meal. If something happens to me, Eleanor must find the truth. It is hidden in the... The sentence trailed off, a smudge of ink where the pen had dropped. But it was enough. I clutched the diary to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of despair this time, but tears of relief. I was not crazy. I was not alone. My father had been fighting them too, right until the end. Beatrice thought she had given me trash to burn. Instead, she had handed me the spark that would burn her world to the ground. I looked at the fire. The cold didn't bother me anymore, because for the first time in 2 months, I felt a different kind of heat. The heat of a plan forming. I know what I have to do. If you are ready to see the hunter become the hunted, comment part 6. I am going to London. The knock on the door came just after midnight. It was soft, hesitant, the knock of someone who didn't want to be heard. I froze. Beatrice had threatened to board up the gatehouse if I caused any trouble. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and moved towards the door. "Who is it?" I whispered. "It is Sterling, my lady. Please, open the door." I lowered the poker. Sterling, the head butler. He had served my father for 40 years. He was the man who taught me how to polish silver, the man who had sneaked me chocolates when my mother died. I opened the door. He stood there, wrapped in a dark cloak, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He looked older, more fragile than I remembered. He held out a small package wrapped in oilskin. "I cannot stay, my lady," he said, his voice trembling. "If her ladyship finds out I am here, I will be dismissed without a reference." But I could not sleep. I saw you reading the master's diary. I saw the smoke from your chimney. He pressed the package into my hands. "Your father gave me this the night he died. He made me swear to give it to you only when you were ready, when you started asking questions." I unwrapped the package. Inside was a single business card, heavy cream cardstock embossed with gold leaf. Chambers of Sir William Halloway, Royal Solicitor, 22 Baker Street, London. And on the back, in my father's handwriting, a single word: trust. "Go to London," Sterling whispered. "Sir William holds the true key. Beatrice knows about him, but she cannot touch him. He is beyond her reach." Before I could thank him, he melted back into the shadows. I stared at the card. London. It was 100 miles away. I had no money. Beatrice had cut off my allowance. I had no car. I looked down at my left hand. There, glinting in the firelight, was the only thing of value I had left. My wedding ring. It was a beautiful thing, a vintage sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Arthur had placed it on my finger 3 years ago, promising to love and cherish me until death did us part. I pulled it off. It left a pale band of white skin on my finger, a scar of a marriage that never truly existed. The next morning, I walked into the village. I pulled my hood low over my face. I went to the pawnbroker on the high street, a place I had never deigned to enter before. The man behind the counter looked at the ring, then at me, suspicion narrowing his eyes. "Stolen?" he asked. I looked him dead in the eye. "No, it was a mistake. I am simply correcting it." He gave me £200. It was a fraction of its worth, but it was enough. I bought a ticket for the 10 a.m. train to London. As the train pulled out of the station, the Blackwood estate flashed past the window. I saw the grey towers of the manor, the sprawling lawns, the prison I had escaped. I touched the bare skin of my ring finger. I felt lighter. Strange, isn't it? I thought selling that ring would feel like losing a part of myself. Instead, it felt like amputation. I had cut off the gangrenous limb to save the body. I was no longer Eleanor the wife. I was no longer Eleanor the victim. As the train gathered speed, rushing towards the capital, I felt a cold steel resolve settling in my spine. I was Eleanor Blackwood, and I was coming for what was mine. If you want to see what happens when I walk into that lawyer's office, comment Part 7. The counterattack begins now. London was a shock to the system. After months of silence in the countryside, the city was a chaotic symphony of black cabs, shouting vendors, and the relentless thrum of millions of lives colliding. I navigated the streets with my head down, clutching my coat tight, until I reached number 22, Baker Street. The chambers of Sir William Halloway were exactly as I imagined. Heavy oak doors, walls lined with leather-bound law books that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Victorian era. The air smelled of ink, parchment, and expensive decisions. Sir William was a man of 60, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see right through my defences. He did not look surprised to see me. "Lady Eleanor," he said, gesturing to a velvet chair, "I have been expecting you. Your father said you would come when the winter became too cold to bear." He opened a safe behind his desk. He pulled out a document sealed with red wax. The Blackwood crest was stamped into it. "This," he said, placing it on the desk between us, "is the only valid last will and testament of the Earl of Blackwood." The document Beatrice produced was a clumsy fabrication. "Your father deposited this with me 3 months before his death." I reached out to touch it. It felt warm. "Read Clause 4, Sir William said softly. I opened the document. My eyes scanned the legal phrasing until I found it. "To my wife, Beatrice, I leave a monthly allowance of £10,000, drawn from the estate interest." £10,000? I looked up, furious. He left her £10,000 a month, after everything she did? "Read the condition, Eleanor." I looked back at the paper. "Provided that, upon my death, she and her daughter treat my eldest heir, Eleanor, with kindness, respect, and dignity. Should there be any evidence of mistreatment, bullying, physical or emotional abuse, or any attempt to displace Eleanor from her rightful home, this allowance is void. They will receive nothing, not a single penny. The estate will provide them with 0 financial support." I stared at the words. The kindness clause. My father knew. He knew exactly who they were. He didn't just leave me the money. He left me a trap to catch them in. Sir William leaned forward. "We have them, Eleanor. With your testimony about the gatehouse, about the theft of your jewellery, we can file a motion today. We can have the police at Blackwood Manor by tomorrow evening. We can evict them for fraud and reinstate you." I sat back in the chair. I thought about Arthur laughing in the window. I thought about Chloe wearing my nightgown. I thought about Beatrice forcing me to polish the floor on my knees. "If we evict them now," I said slowly, "they go to jail for fraud perhaps, but they will claim it was a mistake. They will fight, and eventually they might still get some settlement." Sir William nodded. "It is possible. Litigation is messy." I looked at the will again. "But if I can prove they violated this clause, if I can prove they treated me with cruelty, they get nothing. They are destitute." "Precisely," Sir William said, "but you need irrefutable proof. Your word against theirs is not enough in a probate court." I stood up. The fear that had paralysed me for months was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating clarity. "I don't want to sue them, Sir William, not yet." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go back," I said. I want to let them think they have won. I want them to feel safe, because when people feel safe, they show their true colours. I will be the perfect victim. I will let them bully me. I will let them humiliate me, and I will record every single second of it. You are playing a dangerous game, Eleanor, he warned. No, Sir William, I replied, picking up my gloves. I am not playing a game. I am setting a stage. They want a tragedy? I will give them one. But they are not the heroes of this story anymore. They are the prey. I walked out of that office into the London rain. I touched the empty space on my finger where my wedding ring used to be. I didn't miss it anymore. A ring is a circle, a symbol of eternity, but I didn't want eternity. I wanted an ending, and I was going to write it myself. If you want to see how I set the ultimate trap for my wicked stepmother, comment part 8. The honey trap is about to be sprung. The return to Blackwood Manor required the greatest performance of my life. I had to kill the warrior I had discovered in London and resurrect the broken girl they wanted to see. I walked into the morning room with my head bowed, shoulders slumped. Beatrice was writing invitations. She didn't look up until I stood directly in front of her desk. "Well?" she asked, her pen scratching loudly on the parchment. "Have you finished sulking in the garden?" I fell to my knees. It was a physical act of submission that made bile rise in my throat, but I forced myself to do it. I clasped my hands together. "I am sorry, Beatrice," I whispered, keeping my voice trembling. "You were right. I have been unwell. My mind, it plays tricks on me. I don't want to fight anymore. Please. I just want to be part of the family again, even if it is just to serve you." Beatrice stopped writing. She looked down at me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. She enjoyed this. She fed on it. Finally, she said, leaning back, "A moment of clarity. I told you, Eleanor, we only want what is best for you. If you are ready to accept your place, we can allow you back into the main house, on a trial basis, as part of the staff." "Thank you," I breathed. "Thank you for your kindness." Kindness. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. But as I stood up, I adjusted the pocket of my apron. Hidden deep inside the lining was a small, high-fidelity dictaphone I had purchased in London. The red light was already blinking. Recording started. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in provocation. I became the perfect victim. I anticipated their cruelty, and I amplified it. When I brought Chloe her breakfast in bed, I made sure the toast was slightly cold. Not enough to be incompetence, but enough to be annoying. "Call this breakfast?" she shrieked, throwing the tray across the room. Marmalade splattered against the silk wallpaper. "You useless cow! No wonder Arthur got bored of you. You can't even butter bread correctly." I dropped to my knees to clean it up, making sure to sob loudly. "I am sorry, Chloe. I am so sorry." "Look at you," she sneered, kicking my hand away from a shard of porcelain. "Daddy was right to leave you nothing. He knew you were pathetic. You are nothing but a servant, Eleanor. Actually, you are worse. Servants get paid. You are just a parasite we feed out of pity." I kept my head down, wiping the floor, but my heart was racing with a dark, electric thrill. "Keep talking, Chloe," I thought. "Say it louder. Make sure the microphone catches every syllable of your hate." Later that day, Beatrice found me dusting the library. She walked over and ran a gloved finger along a bookshelf. "Dust," she tutted. "You are lazy, Eleanor. Perhaps a night in the cellar would motivate you. We used to lock the dogs down there when they misbehaved. Maybe you need the same discipline." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh, and shoved me towards the door. The physical contact was revolting, but I didn't pull away. I let her bruise me. A bruise was evidence. A bruise was a ticket to victory. I went to the cellar that night. It was dark, smelling of damp earth and old coal. But I didn't mind the dark anymore. I sat on a wooden crate, took out the dictaphone, and pressed playback. "You useless cow. Parasite. Lock the dogs down there." Their voices echoed in the small device, tinny but undeniable. I had them. I had the verbal abuse. I had the threats. I had the physical aggression. Beatrice thought she had broken me. She thought I was down there crying in the dark. She had no idea that I was smiling. I have enough to destroy them now, but there is one person left, the traitor, the man who broke my heart, Arthur. He requires a special kind of trap. If you want to see how I seduce my husband into confessing his crimes, comment Part 9. The honey trap is set. Greed is a strange thing. It makes smart men stupid and cautious men reckless. I knew Arthur's weakness wasn't lust, it was avarice. He didn't just want to be rich, he wanted to be independently wealthy, free from Beatrice's controlling purse strings. So I planted the seed. I left a forged letter from the Royal Bank of Scotland on the hallway table in the main house, just for a moment, before pretending to hurriedly hide it in my apron when Arthur walked by. The letter detailed a forgotten maternal trust fund worth £3 million, unlocking this week. The bait was set. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, the heavy oak door of the gatehouse creaked open. It was Arthur. He wasn't wearing his usual sneer. He was wearing his apology face, soft eyes, slumped shoulders, the look of a kicked puppy. "Eleanor," he whispered, stepping into the dim light. "God, look at this place. It's freezing. How can you live like this?" I sat by the fire, wrapping my shawl tighter. "I have no choice, Arthur." "You made your choice." He walked closer, kneeling beside my chair. He smelled of brandy and Chloe's cloying perfume. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. "I never wanted this, Elle," he lied, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Beatrice forced my hand, and Chloe, she's impossible. She's a child, Eleanor, a spoiled, insufferable child." I looked at him, widening my eyes in feigned surprise. My hand slipped into my pocket, ensuring the dictaphone was recording. "But you love her," I said softly. "You humiliated me for her." Arthur laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Love her? I tolerate her. I did what I had to do to secure our future. But she is driving me mad. She spends money like water. She screams if she breaks a nail. I miss you, Elle. I miss your quiet. I miss your intelligence." He reached out and took my hand. His palms were sweaty. "I heard rumours," he continued, his eyes darting to my face. "About a trust fund from your mother." There it was, the hook. I nodded slowly. "Yes, £3 million. It releases on Friday, but I don't know what to do." "Beatrice will just take it." Arthur's eyes lit up with a terrifying hunger. "No, she won't. Not if you have me. Listen to me, Eleanor. We can take that money. We can leave. Run away to Italy. Just you and me, like we always planned. I'll divorce Chloe. I'll leave them all to rot." I leaned in close, forcing a smile. "You would do that? You would leave Chloe? You would admit that you only married her for the title?" "Yes," he hissed, squeezing my hand. "It was all a game, Elle, a necessary evil. It's always been you." Got you. I glanced towards the window. I had left the curtains deliberately open. Outside, standing in the rain, illuminated by the spill of light from the fire, was a figure. Chloe. I had sent her an anonymous note an hour ago. If you want to know where your fiancé really is, look in the gatehouse. I saw her face pressed against the glass, twisted in shock and fury. She had seen Arthur on his knees. She had seen him holding my hand. Arthur followed my gaze. He turned. He saw Chloe. The colour drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. "Oh God," he whispered. I pulled my hand away and stood up. The weeping willow act was over. My voice dropped to its natural icy register. "You should probably go, Arthur. I think your fiancé wants a word." He scrambled to his feet, stammering, looking between me and the window. "Eleanor, you set me up." I didn't say a word. I just smiled, a cold, sharp smile that told him everything. He ran out into the rain. I heard Chloe's scream before the door even closed. It was a primal shriek of rage. "You bastard! You lying bastard!" I walked to the window and watched them. Chloe was clawing at his face. Arthur was trying to shield himself, slipping in the mud. The alliance was broken. The rats were turning on each other. I touched the recorder in my pocket. I had his confession. I had proof of his conspiracy. And now I had the pleasure of watching them tear each other apart. But the final blow is yet to come. The party is tomorrow, and I have one last guest to invite. If you want to see the grand finale, where I play this recording in front of the entire British aristocracy, comment part 10. The Queen of Blackwood is returning to her throne. Great Hall of Blackwood Manor had never looked more magnificent or more fake. 500 guests from the finest families in England were packed under the crystal chandeliers, sipping vintage champagne and admiring the floral arrangements I had spent 3 days creating. I was there too, but not as a guest. I was wearing a black uniform, a white apron, and holding a silver tray of canapés. I was invisible, a ghost moving through the crowd of people who used to call me their friend. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. Beatrice stood on the grand staircase, looking down at her kingdom. She clinked a spoon against her glass, demanding silence. "My dear friends," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We have gathered here to celebrate love. My daughter Chloe and my beloved son-in-law Arthur have found happiness in a time of great sorrow." I looked at the happy couple. They were a disaster. Chloe had plastered layers of makeup over her eyes to hide the puffiness from crying. Arthur looked like a man walking to the gallows. He kept glancing at me, terrified. He knew I had the recording. He just didn't know when I would use it. Beatrice continued. "We are a family that survives. We support each other. We treat each other with kindness." I almost laughed out loud. The irony was suffocating. Suddenly, Chloe snapped her fingers. "Eleanor, wine, now!" I walked over to where she was holding court with a group of young socialites. I held out the tray of red wine. My hand was steady. Chloe looked at me, her eyes full of venom. She whispered so only I could hear. "You told him about the trust fund, didn't you? You lying witch. There is no money." I looked her in the eye. I didn't say a word. The silence provoked her. Her rage boiled over. With a sudden, violent motion, she swept her hand across the tray. Crash! 3 glasses of heavy Bordeaux wine shattered against my chest. The dark red liquid exploded over my white apron, soaking into my dress, dripping onto the marble floor like blood. The entire hall went silent. The music stopped. 500 pairs of eyes turned to look at us. Chloe gasped, playing the victim instantly. "Oh, look what you did, you clumsy idiot. You ruined my shoes. Mummy, she attacked me." Beatrice rushed down the stairs. "Eleanor, have you lost your mind? Get a towel. Clean this up immediately. Apologize to your sister." Usually I would have knelt. I would have apologized. I would have scrubbed the floor with my tears. But not tonight. I stood perfectly still. The wine dripped from my hem. I did not wipe it. I did not lower my eyes. I looked straight at Beatrice, then at Arthur, and finally at Chloe. "No," I said. My voice was calm, projecting clearly across the silent room. "I will not clean it up, and I will certainly not apologize." Beatrice's face turned purple. "How dare you! Security! Throw her out!" I raised my hand. "Stop!" There was something in my voice, an authority that had been buried for months, that made the guards hesitate. I turned to the main entrance. The heavy oak doors were closed. Standing by them, rigid and loyal, was Sterling. He was looking at me, waiting for the command. I nodded once. "Open the doors, Sterling." The old butler pushed the double doors wide open. The wind and rain from outside swirled into the warm hall. But it wasn't just the wind that entered. Marching in, flanked by 2 royal police officers and a team of 4 solicitors in black robes, was Sir William Halloway. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Sir William walked straight up to me, ignoring Beatrice completely. He handed me a document. Beatrice screamed, "Who are these people? This is a private party!" I took the document. I looked at the red stain on my chest, then at the terrified faces of my family. "The party is over, Beatrice," I said, "and so is your reign. If you want to see the moment I take back my crown, comment part 11. The kindness clause is about to be read." Sir William did not need a microphone. His voice, honed in the highest courts of London, cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, holding the document high. "The document previously executed by Lady Beatrice is a forgery. This is the true last will and testament of the late Earl." Beatrice marched up to him, her face a mask of indignation. "This is preposterous. I am his wife. You cannot simply barge in here and—" "Read clause 4, Beatrice," I interrupted. My voice was low, but in the dead silence of the hall, it sounded like a thunderclap. Sir William adjusted his spectacles. He read slowly, savouring every word. "To my wife Beatrice and her daughter Chloe, I leave a monthly allowance of £10,000. A sigh of relief rippled through the room. Beatrice's shoulders relaxed. She smirked at me. 10,000 a month. She could survive on that. It wasn't the millions she wanted, but it was enough to keep her in silk and champagne. "See," she scoffed, regaining her composure. Even in death he knew his duty to me. "Now, Eleanor, get out of my sight before I have you arrested for causing a scene." "Keep reading, Sir William," I commanded. The solicitor cleared his throat. "Provided that upon my death they have treated my daughter, Eleanor, with kindness, respect and dignity." This clause is the kindness clause. Should there be any evidence of mistreatment, bullying, or attempts to displace Eleanor from her home, this allowance is void. 0. The room went quiet again. Beatrice laughed. It was a nervous, shrill sound. "Well, that is fine. We have been nothing but kind. We gave her a place to live. We fed her. We gave her a job when she was clearly unwell. Who is to say otherwise? It is her word against ours. And frankly, who would believe a hysterical girl over a countess?" I stepped forward. The wine stain on my chest was drying, turning a dark, rusty red. "You are right, Beatrice," I said. Words are wind, but evidence? Evidence is eternal. I pulled a small remote control from my apron pocket. Behind Beatrice, a large projection screen, set up for the engagement slideshow, flickered to life. I had connected my device to the system while I was setting up the flowers. "Let us define kindness, shall we?" I asked. I pressed play. The first sound was a slap, sharp and violent. Then came Beatrice's voice, amplified through the massive speakers of the great hall. "You are a parasite, Eleanor, a useless waste of space. Get down to the cellar. Dogs sleep in the cellar." The crowd gasped. The Duchess of York, standing in the front row, covered her mouth with a gloved hand. Beatrice froze. I pressed the button again. Now the screen showed a video. It was grainy, hidden camera footage from the kitchen. It showed Chloe deliberately tripping me while I was carrying a pot of boiling water. I fell. I screamed in pain. Chloe stood over me, laughing. "Look at her, pathetic. Clean it up, Cinderella, before I tell Mummy you are clumsy." Chloe let out a strangled cry. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" But I didn't. I looked at Arthur. He was trying to inch away towards the exit. "And you, Arthur," I said, "my loving husband, let us hear your version of kindness." I played the final clip. The audio from the gatehouse last night. It was crystal clear. "I only married her for the title. I tolerate her. We can take the money and run, Chloe. Leave them all to rot." Arthur closed his eyes. His social standing, his reputation, his future. It all evaporated in 10 seconds of audio. I turned off the screen. The silence in the hall was heavy, suffocating. 500 people stared at the trio of villains standing on the stage. They looked small now, shrunken by their own malice. I walked up to Beatrice. She was trembling. Her face was pale, stripped of all its arrogance. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice cracking, We can talk about this. We are family." I looked her in the eye. "Family? No. Family protects you. You preyed on me. You thought kindness was a weakness. You thought because I was quiet, I was stupid. You thought because I served you, I was beneath you." I turned to Sir William. "Sir William, based on the evidence presented, have the conditions of the kindness clause been met?" "Decidedly not, Lady Eleanor," he replied, snapping the folder shut. "Then execute the penalty," I said. Sir William looked at Beatrice, then at Chloe and Arthur. "Lady Beatrice, Miss Chloe, Mr. Arthur, by the power vested in me as the executor of the Blackwood estate, I hereby declare the allowance void. You are to receive nothing, no money, no property, no assets. Furthermore, you are currently trespassing on private property." "Trespassing?" Beatrice shrieked. "This is my house." "Not any more," I said. I pointed to the open doors where the rain was still pouring down. "My father defined kindness as dignity. You stripped me of mine. So now I am stripping you of yours. You have 10 minutes to pack your bags. And Beatrice?" She looked at me, tears of rage streaming down her face. "Leave the jewellery," I said, cold as ice. "It belongs to the Countess, and that is me. If you want to see them thrown out into the mud where they belong, comment Part 12. The eviction begins now." The collapse of the Blackwood usurpers was not dignified. It was a spectacle of desperate, clawing panic. Beatrice was the first to react. Realising her authority had evaporated, she resorted to her oldest trick. She gasped, clutched her chest, and collapsed onto the Persian rug in a heap of velvet and fake diamonds. "Call an ambulance," she wailed, her eyes fluttering. "My heart! You are killing me, Eleanor! You are killing your own mother!" I signalled to the paramedics who were already waiting outside. Sir William had anticipated everything. They rushed in, not to treat her, but to check her vitals. "Her pulse is normal," the medic announced flatly. "She is hyperventilating. It is a panic attack, nothing more." "Get up, Beatrice," I said, looking down at her. "The performance is over. The curtain has fallen." Meanwhile, Chloe had lost all semblance of humanity. She was screaming, a high-pitched banshee wail that shattered the last remnants of the party's atmosphere. She tried to lunge at me again, her fingernails hooked like talons, but 2 officers caught her arms. "Get off me!" she shrieked, kicking and spitting. "You can't touch me! I am Lady Chloe! I own this house! Eleanor, tell them to unhand me!" I poured myself a glass of water from a nearby table. "You are not a lady, Chloe. You are a trespasser, and you are making a scene." But the most pathetic display came from Arthur. He didn't scream, he didn't faint, he crawled. He actually fell to his knees and shuffled towards me, grabbing the hem of my wine-stained dress. "Elle, please," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. "You know this wasn't me. It was them. Beatrice forced me. Chloe seduced me. I was weak, Elle. I was a victim too. I love you. I still love you. We can fix this. We can start over." I looked down at him. He looked like a slug, leaving a trail of slime across the floor. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of disgust that I had ever let this creature touch me. "Stand up, Arthur," I said. "You are ruining the carpet." He scrambled up, hope flickering in his eyes. "You forgive me?" "No," I said. "But I have one last piece of news for you. Sir William?" The solicitor stepped forward, holding a thick file. "Mr. Arthur," he began, "we are aware that you have taken out significant loans from private creditors, loan sharks to be precise, using your status as the husband of the heiress as collateral." Arthur turned pale. "Those loans amount to £400,000, I continued. "You told the creditors that the Blackwood estate would cover them. But since I have frozen all assets and filed for an annulment based on fraud, the estate is no longer liable." Arthur's mouth opened and closed like a fish. But I can't pay that. They will kill me. Eleanor, they will break my legs." "Then I suggest you start running," I said calmly, "because I just forwarded your new address to them." "New address?" he stammered. "Yes, the streets." I nodded to the police. "Get them out." The officers moved in. They hauled Beatrice up from the floor. They dragged a screaming Chloe towards the door, and they pushed a weeping, trembling Arthur out into the night. The guests watched in silence as the trio was marched through the great hall. They were paraded past the people they had tried to impress, past the servants they had abused, and out through the heavy oak doors. I followed them to the threshold. The rain was still pouring down, a torrential, cleansing flood. They stood in the mud, shivering, their expensive clothes instantly soaked. The lights of the manor blazed behind me, warm and golden, while they faced the cold, dark reality of their future. Beatrice looked back at me one last time, her mascara running down her face like black tears. "You will regret this, Eleanor. You will be alone." I looked at the empty driveway, then at the warm hall filled with people, and finally at myself. "Better alone than with wolves," I replied. I signalled Sterling. "Close the doors." The heavy wood slammed shut with a sound of finality that echoed in my bones. The storm was outside. The rats were gone. And for the first time in 3 years, the air in Blackwood Manor was clean. If you want to see the final sunrise and the new era of Lady Eleanor, comment Part 13, The Queen Has Returned. The storm passed, the rain stopped, and when the sun rose over Blackwood Manor the next morning, the light was different. It was cleaner, sharper. I woke up in my own bed, not the iron cot in the gatehouse, but the 4-poster bed in the master suite. I walked to the window and opened the curtains. The air was crisp, smelling of wet earth and new beginnings. I went down to the garden. My mother's rose garden. For years, Beatrice had let it rot, calling it an eyesore. Weeds had choked the delicate blooms, thorns had overgrown the paths, but as I walked through the tangled mess, I saw a single white bud pushing through the debris. It had survived, just like me. I knelt down and began to pull out the weeds with my bare hands. I did not wear gloves. I wanted to feel the earth. I wanted to feel the ownership of this land in my fingernails. From where I knelt, I had a perfect view of the gatehouse. It looked small and miserable in the morning light. Thin grey smoke curled from the chimney. I had allowed them to stay there for 1 week, not out of kindness, but out of practicality. It would take them that long to find somewhere else to go, somewhere that wasn't a prison cell or a gutter. I saw a figure come out to fetch wood. It was Arthur. He was wearing his expensive suit, but it was ruined, caked in dried mud. He looked up and saw me standing in the rose garden. He stopped. For a moment our eyes met across the expanse of the lawn. He looked waiting for me to wave, to signal forgiveness, to call him back. I turned my back on him. I went back to pruning my roses. People often ask me if I forgive them. They say forgiveness is divine, but I think they are wrong. Forgiveness is a gift you give to someone who deserves it. What I have for them is not forgiveness. It is not even hate. It is indifference. I don't care if they freeze. I don't care if they starve. I don't care if they live or die. They are simply no longer part of my story. They are footnotes in a history book that I have closed. I walked back inside the manor. Sterling was waiting for me in the morning room. The table was set with the finest silver. A pot of Earl Grey was steaming. "Good morning, my lady," he said, pulling out my chair. "The solicitors are arriving at 10 to discuss the transfer of assets, and the gardener has been hired to restore the grounds." "Thank you, Sterling," I said, taking a sip of tea. It tasted perfect. I sat there, in the silence of my great house, and looked at the portraits of my ancestors on the wall. My father looked down at me, and for the first time in years, his eyes didn't look sad. They looked proud. They called me Cinderella. They thought I was a fairy tale, waiting for a prince to save me. They thought I needed a glass slipper to prove my worth. But they forgot who I am. I am not a princess who needs rescuing. I am the daughter of the Earl. I am the survivor of the storm. I am the Lady of Blackwood. I put down my cup. The tea was finished. The drama was over. I have work to do. This is Eleanor Blackwood signing off. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, never mistake a woman's silence for weakness. It is just the calm before she reclaims her crown.